Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is a bit of a fun one. This is actually a collaboration with my good friend Parasol Mushroom Art or Parasol Mushroom Studios, and she has a lovely channel here on YouTube if you want to go check it out. And we decided that we were both going to do a color palette challenge and we were going to generate a color palette for each other. So as you can see here, I'm just using this little website and I'm flipping through a few color palettes until I find one I like, which is this one. And this one here is actually the one that Parasol Mushroom generated for me, and it's quite interesting. So without further ado, let's dive into it and make some art with this lovely colorful color palette. So I've decided today that I want to do a bit of a watercolor artwork, and the paints I'm using are my favorite paints. These are my fancy smancy Sennelier watercolors, and they are quite beautiful, and I've had them for quite a few years and they have done me pretty well. The paper I'm actually using is a Fabriano watercolor paper, and it's a cold pressed one, and it is A3, so I'm actually doing a larger artwork than normal because for this one I want to get a lot of details in. So since I'm doing traditional art, obviously I can't get the colors extremely perfect. However, I am doing my best, and I think with watercolors, since you can mix colors very easily, I think that it would be a good fit for this color palette challenge. Now, to begin, I am just using a little bit of a warm sepia color because I think that it fits that brown color in the color palette pretty well. And I have wet the paper here, and I'm just doing some very subtle background trees. Now for this artwork, I decided that I kind of want to do like a cold wintry forest, kind of in the middle of autumn and winter. That is honestly the feelings that I got very strongly from this color palette. It feels like a very cool earthy kind of color palette, and I really like the sort of soft desaturated reds and the nice soft sort of brown colors, as well as the pale like almost bluish green color as well. I don't know, it just really feels like a cold beginning of winter sort of scene for me. So I built up some very subtle trees. You can barely see them in the background, and I used a lot of water so that they ended up being very soft and very smooth and like, I don't know, no sharp edges or anything. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to kind of have some trees in the background and have like a misty feel towards the back. And then after that fully dried, I added in a little bit of a brown sort of line that was very blended out, and off that I decided to paint some trees. Now I'm using the same color as before, but obviously with less water, and I'm doing them a little bit more defined, as you can see, and obviously they are a little bit darker because they're getting closer towards the viewer. Now after this, I want to add in some foreground details, and first I'm starting off with the lightest details, which is going to be some patchy snow on the ground. Now of course I wanted to paint some snow with that sort of very light subtle cold color. It's a very bright highlight kind of color, and I had to add in the lightest details first, because with watercolor you really have to work from light to dark, because you can't really build up highlights later on unless you add in things like gouache, which I actually might do towards the end. But anyways, I'm adding in that blue color and I'm using a lot of water, and I actually mixed a sort of like a grayish Payne's gray color with a tiny amount of blue, like the tiniest amount, and a very minuscule amount of green as well, just to have it sort of on that sort of hue. Now after I got that down with a few layers, as you can see there's some shadows but it is still very light, I decided to go in and draw a whole bunch of mushrooms onto the ground, because I want this sort of scene to be like the middle of autumn, and then it's like the middle, like, how do I explain this? The middle of the two seasons, autumn and winter, if that makes sense. So we have some little mushrooms here, and then obviously some little patches of snow, And then now I'm just adding in some more details. So as I'm working towards the foreground, I'm actually going to be doing line art here before I draw the items or paint the items, because I kind of have to be more careful about where I place certain things like trees, because I don't want to cover up too many of the details that are behind that I really like. And I'm just using more brown here, and I'm actually adding a little bit more of that gray color into the brown to get these nice dark trees. Now for the forest floor, I shall say, for this to look good, I need to build up a lot of layers of textures and details. So first I'm starting off with a grayish, almost green kind of color for the ground, but don't worry, we're going to soften that with a lot of browns so it still works with the color palette. And I'm just adding in a whole layer to fill that in. And then after this, I'm going in with some browns and some gray kind of colors and more of that sort of greenish gray kind of color, and I'm just building up some little textures. Now obviously this is the beginning of winter, so we can't really have any like lush foliage that I usually like to draw or paint with these sort of scenic like paintings. So I decided to go with like sticks and like little almost like dying bushes, because obviously like plants are dying back because it's getting really cold, and a lot of like leaves and stuff on the ground and sticks, and then just lots of little textures here and there to make things look nice and interesting. Now I decided to add in some very desaturated red colors because there is a soft desaturated red in the color palette, and I decided to use that for some leaves in the trees, but make sure it's still very like sparse, because we want these trees to look like they are getting ready for winter. And after this, I felt like I needed something to help frame the artwork a little bit more, so I ended up adding in my typical thing that I like to do, which is some foreground trees just on the edges here. And honestly, I actually really like the way that that looks as well, especially since I made them nice and dark with that Payne's gray color, and I think that it just helps to sort of, I don't know, just draw your eye to the middle of the page, if that makes sense. Now this is where the artwork sort of turns a little bit more mixed media, because you know how I said earlier that I might be using a little bit of gouache or something else in this? Well, I decided to get out some of my colored pencils, and we're just going to just define the lines and just define a few details here and there with these pencils. And first I decided to do that with all of the mushrooms. I added a nice sort of dark outline and a little bit of shading on the top as well for the mushrooms, and I used a sort of desaturated red color, I think it's like henna or something, and I think that it was a pretty good color for these mushrooms. I'm also using some colored pencils here and there for a little bit of texture in the ground, as well as a few details like extra bushes and just little like leaves and things like that, as well as some texture and just define the details of the bark on the trees as well, and I think that that is turning out pretty nicely. After this, I decided to go back in with the watercolor, one to just fix a little mistake that you saw earlier. I got some paint on my sleeve, but also just to add some little shadows and textures, and especially some extra twigs in the ground as well. And as you can see, I'm trying to add a little bit of shadows as well below the trees that are in the foreground to try and just have a little bit more interest there. Now after this, I'm actually going to get out my gouache paint. So this really is a bit of a mixed media, but mainly watercolor. And I am just going to use some white gouache here to add in the little speckles on the mushrooms. I have been looking forward to this part because I think that it's going to turn out very, very cute. And that gouache is going to make it so much easier for me to add those little speckles so that I don't have to like painstakingly go around all of these little dots when I actually painted and added line art for those mushrooms. And I think it worked out very well. I really like the results of this, and I think that the color palette was definitely a bit of a challenge. I was really tempted to add in extra colors, but I think I kept mostly to the theme, and I think it turned out really nicely, especially after I peel up all of that tape and we get that nice little watercolor border around the paper. So anyways, here is the final result, and honestly I love this artwork so much. I think it turned out really nice, and I don't know, just got a nice little vibe to it, and I'm really excited to see what Parasol Mushroom does with her color palette. I think it's going to be very interesting. So if you want to check that out, definitely follow the link in the description, and she's probably going to be in the comments as well, so keep an eye out for that, and check out her channel and watch her video and subscribe to her as well, because she's pretty great. And if you're coming from her channel, welcome. My name is Sarah, or Scribblefix, you can call me either, and I just love to make art videos and stuff, so I hope you'll hit that subscribe button to get your Scribblefix in the future. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Please stay safe out there, and I shall see you in my next video. Bye everyone.